episode of the Normal America Show, where I'm once more not at my home office. Called in late to work, so I had a show scheduled for tonight. May have to leave at a moment's notice if something comes up. You know the story by now, so hope you're all doing fantastic. Sorry I couldn't be at the home office today. Should be there tomorrow and Friday night, so should be streaming my regular scheduled show there to all of my platforms. But for today, you can see we don't have the fancy bells and whistles, the border, the chats that are as neat, the ability to stream on Twitch, etc., etc. As always, winging it, which is what I do well. Now, when it comes to production value and things of that nature, I leave a lot to be desired. My looks, not the most handsome man in the world. I have an annoying sounding voice, which doesn't do me any favors because, at least if you're gonna have an annoying voice, be incredibly handsome. I seem to have none of that, but one thing I have is I can talk, baby. When it comes to actually doing the content, I think I do quite well, so still working on the bells and whistles, and you got people around me trying to help with those sort of things. But I appreciate all of you for helping me grow my channel, particularly around this time of the election where I think it's so important. And I enjoy spending time with you. So hope that comes through. And apologies that I haven't been able to stream as much. I assure you that's going to change here in the near future. This week is my busiest week of the year at work. It looks like we're rounding the corner on that. All of the paperwork that I've been spending the past month diligently doing, working grotesque hours of overtime, even more than I normally do. So instead of my normal 80 hours a week, probably putting in closer to 90. I think it's all going to be coming to an end at the end of this week. Also, I will be taking election week off, and I'm not going on vacation or anything. That's just an extra week of vacation that I had built up. And so I'm going to be spending that with you largely. We're going to do the 24-hour show that's going to be November 2nd to November 3rd, which I hope you all enjoy. I have a ton of guests lined up. Now, I had multiple types of people that were lining up guests for me. The guest that one group of people that I was shooting for, which are sort of bigger people in the streaming space, people like Tim Pool, Dave Smith, others like that, it looks like are probably going to be out of my reach from getting many of those. However, I will have a lot of people from the Crucible coming on. I know Andrew Wilson and Rachel Wilson will probably come on. They might be able to get me some people like Jim Bob, that's a friend of the show. So I think we'll have some great people like that. I'm sure my friends Aircraft Sparky, Aftershock, Lecture Fan, probably have a good shot of getting those sorts of people on. But as always, my connections basically through my former radio co-host Carlos Saldivia are coming through, and I'm going to have a ton of RNC officials, both elected officials and members of the RNC in Pennsylvania that are going to be coming on. So I think we have about 7 or 8 confirmed. So I'm talking about state level Congress people, county commissioners, people involved in the RNC. The secretary of the RNC, I think, is going to be calling in, the treasurer. We're going to shoot for some of our Congress people, Republicans that are in Congress that will be running for re-election for the National Congress. So it's going to be a great show. Kyle Beckman, thanks so much for $20, says, so Kamala Harris said that Donald Trump is unhinged and proceeded to shout at Bret Baier 50% of the interview and then ended with a Schenk Uyghur Google about her policies on the website. Great job, Kamala. Oh, we're going to talk all about Kamala and her implosion of an interview with Bret Baier. Just wanted to get some housekeeping stuff. I watched it on Fox. Now, I don't have cable when I'm at home. Here at work, I do have cable. So as I was doing some house cleaning, I was able to watch it before I clocked out here. And so I'm sure you'll be able to find clips of it on X. As far as the full unedited interview, you'll have to go somewhere through Fox News, I would guess. I won't be able to play any of those clips because unfortunately I'm not at home. So maybe we'll deal with some of that tomorrow, playing some of those clips. Seeing as how I'm not at home, I'm streaming off of a phone and I'm incapable of bringing up those videos while I'm on the phone. So instead you get my commentary on the interview, but that's what you're here for anyway. So take my word for it. When I say she said something, she did. So, but anyways, just to wrap up there. So that 24-hour show is going to be great. I will be streaming election night. My plan, election day, I'm trying to reach out to as many people as I know in the area and encourage them to either register to get their mail-in ballots early, or I'm going to be spending the day here in Pennsylvania driving people to the polling station and bothering all of the people I know to get out and vote. So I'm going to try to do everything I can during the day. And then in the evening, I will be streaming all election night as well. So it should be a fun week. I'll be tired. I'm sure I'll be tired by the end of the week. But hey, you know, I think it's for a show like me that streams politics. It's my Super Bowl, right? So we're gonna. Oh, the crooked lamp's annoying. You never win with you people. You know, if it was up to me, this lamp wouldn't be here anymore. What was that? A little less crooked. You're also at a weird angle, which I apologize for, but the nature of how this desk is set up, this is the best I could do. So, one last thing. Thanks. I enjoyed debating them as well. One last thing. I am making a commitment. Well, let me start with this. Since last I've seen you, if anyone who's followed me for a while, I have 2 bulging discs, herniated discs in my back. It's been causing me a tremendous amount of pain. I try to keep a smile on my face, but it sucks. It really does. And it does affect sort of some of my day-to-day activities, not just physical activities, but I think also it interrupts some of my sleep. I think I'm sleeping well most of the time, but then my wife tells me all the time that I'm tossing and turning and waking up, so I'm sure it's affecting the quality of sleep I get. It's just not been good. It's not been the best of scenarios. I went in last week and I saw a specialist, and then Monday I actually ended up getting an injection in my back. That was Monday, and I gotta say, I feel better today than I felt in a year. I really do. I felt like I slept last night incredibly well. My back still has a little pain, but it's nowhere near what it was. So I woke up in a fantastic mood, and along with that came sort of an enthusiasm to be putting out more content, particularly going into the election, but also a commitment to do a better job of putting out content on a consistent basis. So first, I would like to thank, obviously, my great editor, Black Elk, who's been fantastic at clipping these live streams I do and is been putting those videos up. So right now I'm streaming exclusively to YouTube. So please check out those videos. I know if you're watching these live streams, it might be a little annoying that 2 days later, you then see a 5-minute clip from one of these live streams as a video. But if you get the time to check those videos out, to give them a thumbs up, I think that increases my chance to reach a broader audience that's not necessarily just going to stumble onto some fat, hairy guy live streaming for 2 hours at a chunk talking about politics if they could see like a 5-minute clip. The other thing that I want to do is start doing YouTube Shorts. I get no traction on my YouTube Shorts whatsoever. I had been using TikTok. I hate TikTok. I hate the idea that they're probably involved with the Chinese government, but at the same point, most of the companies that own the platforms that I'm on, such as YouTube, Twitch, there's all sorts of nefarious stuff going on with the owners of them as well. One of the reasons that I liked using TikTok for short form videos is it automatically puts the captions in. So I was able to do a TikTok video, put it on the platform of TikTok, have it caption the video, then download that video onto my phone, and then upload that video to YouTube, to other places. However, TikTok videos could be up to 2 to 10 minutes. YouTube Shorts can only be 1 minute. So most of those videos from TikTok were just going on my X platform and as normal videos on YouTube. TikTok has decided to basically shut me down. They are banning videos that I make left and right, videos that you could see yourself that are up on YouTube right now. So if you go to YouTube and you check out some of my recent shorts, many of those were community strikes on TikTok with no explanation whatsoever. In fact, the one I got a strike on had to do, ironically, with Kamala Harris saying that she wanted to give a pathway to citizenship for illegals that came in, and the fact that they're challenging voter rolls being cleaned up. And I said, it's ironically in that video, I said, on certain platforms, if you use the wrong terms discussing these sorts of issues, you are censored as a racist. And ironically, TikTok censored me. So screw TikTok. I will now be using the YouTube Shorts platform, and I'm going to try at least 5 times a week to be putting up a YouTube Short. Today I put up 2, so I get 0 traction on those. I think the YouTube Shorts that I've put up this week, I've got like 20 views on each of them. So if you're bored later, go to my page, check out the Shorts page, and you'll see some shorts I did that's exclusive content. Check that out. And I'm going to try to do that consistently and see if that helps me in the algorithm with a place like YouTube to be able to get more of a reach for what I really like doing, which is these live streams. All right, enough house cleaning. We stalled enough. Let's talk about what you're all here to talk about, the Bret Baier interview of Kamala Harris. Now, I'm going to bury the lead What I'm going to do is start off with the positive of Kamala Harris. Then I'll give an overarching view on what I think happened. And then I will talk specifics about the things I think she did. So first, let me talk about the positives. That way, if there's any lefty that's watching that, notice the lefties don't handle things well. You see, like with left-wing streamer Destiny, when the news cycle doesn't go their way, all of a sudden they're saying you're effing around and finding out if you happen to get murdered in an assassination attempt at a Trump rally, etc., etc. They don't handle things when you are pro-establishment and you're used to all of our institutions being on your side. You don't really handle any perceived losses. So let me start off for their mental health, right? And give two positives to this. The one is a legitimate positive from something that Kamala Harris said. Okay, we'll give three. The first is, and this is the least positive of what I'm going to say here, is she did do a good job of attacking Donald Trump. Unfortunately, as we'll get to when I talk about the appearance overarchingly, I don't think that's going to change any minds. At this point, everybody knows that the Democrats have attacked Donald Trump for 8 years. They're aware of the attacks. The reason that Kamala Harris is out there right now is because, well, we'll get to exactly. I don't think things are going as well for them as they would like. And so they can't use their just sort of hide behind closed door strategy. And so what people really want to know, what they didn't get out of the Kamala Trump debate, even though I thought she won that debate, they didn't get a clear picture of who is Kamala Harris. How will your presidency be different than your vice presidency? What would you have done different than Joe Biden? Why have you seemed to have changed so many positions? Those are the lingering questions that people had. And this was her chance to go to a place like Fox News, where there might be people that, traditionally aren't necessarily Democrats or they're centrist, and they're weighing whether or not they want to vote for a person who they don't personally like in Donald Trump or a person who they don't know what they would be like in Kamala Harris. I don't think she did any favors on that. But seeing as how we're talking about the good things, I do think she did a good job of hitting the talking points about why Trump's dangerous, why she thinks it's dangerous, why people connected to Trump, such as Mike Pence and his former chief of staff, have said that they don't think he's qualified to be president. So she got to those talking points. That's a very small upside for her. The legitimate upside, and maybe I'll get some pushback on this, I do think at one point Bret Baier talked about the names of some of the people that were killed by illegals, such as Lake and Riley, and I think that Kamala Harris did a very good job of seeming empathetic to those people and their families. Now you might say, well, that's a low bar, that's easy to do. Yeah, but sometimes it's easy to come off as callous when you're defending your record and someone talks about specific individuals. For example, if you were in an administration where soldiers died, and an interviewer asks you, oh, what do you say to the family of the soldier that died that blames you for their death? You might think that your policies were tremendous that led to that soldier dying, and it's just unfortunate anytime you order a military decision that someone may die, even if you think you made the right decision. So it's easy to be combative and say, well, I did nothing wrong. And I think that although Kamala Harris isn't saying, yes, you're right, my fault, she does seem to be very empathetic towards the family members of the people that died. And again, I'd say this with all honesty, I do think that came across as at least sounding very genuine. Is it genuine? I don't know. But it came across as saying, I feel terrible, of course. And it's easy to say those things, I know. It's not like, she reinvented the wheel or anything like that. But I'll give her credit for that. I really will. So that's it. That's all positive that I have to say. The only other thing I'll say to positive is just surrounding the interview and not the interview itself. I don't know how much of an impact this will have. Much like the debates, the J.D. Vance debate, where he crushed Tim Walz, will this actually change ballots? Will this actually lead to people? It may. It absolutely may, but it may not as well. That's it. That's the positives I have from this. Anyone else, real quick, have any other positives before I talk overarchingly what happened? That's me trying to be as generous as possible. That's it. Now, overarchingly, let's look at this. It was a half an hour. The interview was a half an hour. So let's set the scene for why this occurs. Now, for me, as someone who legitimately wants the best candidate to win, I'm all for as much exposure as possible in an unfiltered as way as possible to the American people for all of our candidates in the primary season, in the general election season. That's different than the strategic gamesmanship of how you set up interviews, etc. Let me give you an example. If I'm Trump's team, I'm not doing any mainstream media interview. In fact, if I'm a Republican, period, unless you're someone who's incredibly talented at it, such as a J.D. Vance, a Ron DeSantis, a Vivek Ramaswamy, I think that the appropriate response for any run-of-the-mill Republican, conservative, populist, any of those groups, libertarian, is to completely shun places like CBS that have showed they are merely propagandists for the establishment. That's who they are. So it is not going in to a adversarial press relationship anymore. It is literally going into propagandists that are working as surrogates for your opposition. So I understand gamesmanship why you wouldn't want to go in. It's regrettable. I wish we had a press that was adversarial towards all sides, that tried to be even-handed, that didn't try to put their thumb on the scale as much as they were trying to allow people to hear unfiltered from the candidates themselves. I also understand things like if you're ahead, you're less likely to do certain events. When I ran for Congress, I've told this story before, but when I ran for Congress, I had zero name recognition. I happened to be a very good debater. I was good in college. I'm good at thinking quick on my feet. I'm affable. I come off as very likable to the people that were the voters. You might say, I don't think that. I'm a DGG fan. I think you're a disgusting right-winger, blah, 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 blah. Well, you weren't voting for me in a Republican primary. To Republicans, they enjoyed me. And so for all those reasons, when I ran for Congress, I wanted to do as many debates and as many appearances in front of the voters as possible. However, the gentleman who ends up winning that race is a man by the name of Fred Keller. He wouldn't want to do any debates with me. And it's not even necessarily that he's afraid that I would beat him in a debate, though there's part of that. I think he knows that would have likely been the case. But what does he gain from it? It's the equivalent of, take a sport like boxing. Imagine that you're the champ and some relative unknown who's a power puncher is out there. Why would you box them? You have nothing to gain. You might lose, and then it's a huge upset. And if you win, everyone expected it. So what's the point? You're already champ. You're going to fight the big money matches, the number one contenders. It's similar to that. So let's go into once it becomes Trump versus Harris. Now, despite the fact that you were gaslit, by the way, brief caveat, the same people, we should never let them down, whether it be the lefties that I debate continually, whether it be the pundits that you see on television, whether it be members of the mainstream press, whether it be members of the Democratic Party, or the Harris-Biden administration themselves. They gaslit you for years that Joe Biden wasn't having cognitive issues. They lied to you over and over and over and over again. And they did so, one, because they were happy with the arrangement of people behind the scenes of Biden's team actually running things. That was their intent from the get-go. But secondly, because they thought they would be able to run out the clock and cross the finish line with Joe Biden and win and keep any populist or Trump or DeSantis or Vivek, whoever would win the Republican primary, out of office. The problem was that it became evident to people, particularly in that debate with Biden versus Trump. Then the American people saw that the emperor had no clothes, and so they had to full force attack Biden. Now remember that. Remember people like Wick, who's a lefty that's, I've interacted with. Remember how furious he was? The press isn't even being the press. Why are they attacking Biden? Oh my goodness, they're treating Biden for 2 weeks like they've treated Trump for 8 years, and they couldn't handle it. The Biden supporters couldn't handle it. This is outrageous. How dare they? It wasn't that Jake Tapper and members of the press all of a sudden got a consciousness, or that they were unaware of Biden's mental health problems 2 days before the debate when they were saying that you were spending, what did they call them? Something fakes. Remember they called it, not deep fakes, but they were saying you were peddling misinformation and fake videos when you showed evidence of Biden's cognitive decline. No, it was instead that they realized the best chance they had to win was to get Joe Biden out of the primary. Cheap fakes, that was it. Thanks, WW. Yeah, cheap fakes, remember? That's what made this so anti-democratic. They lied to the American people about Biden's mental health because they were afraid, not me. They didn't lie to me. Of course, they did lie to me, but I wasn't the target of their lies. The target of their lies was the average Democrat voter. They did not trust the average Democrat primary voter to pick someone that they wanted. So they lied to them. They said Joe Biden's mental health is great, thereby ensuring that Biden was the de facto victor in a primary. The sitting president, if he's running again, is almost always going to win. Then immediately after, once the primary is done, they say, oh, he can't run. And they install Kamala Harris in one of the most anti-democratic actions that we've ever seen in a presidential election cycle. Anyways, I digress. Never let them live that down. By the way, what they'll do now is go, but Biden has cognitive decline. Biden has cognitive decline. Trump has cognitive decline. What about Trump? He danced on stage for 30 minutes. Right out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, accuse them of what you yourself have done. They know what they've done, and so we'll get to that later here with Kamala Harris, talking about how Trump's going to use the military to go after his opponents, use the justice system to go after his opponents. That's literally what they do. They accuse you that you may hypothetically do what they've already done, and that would be a disaster if you do it. That's their game. Nonetheless, proceeding here, those same people had gaslit the American people so much about how the economy is great, the border's great, foreign policy is great, Joe Biden's one of the greatest presidents ever. You can see this all over the place. Not just random people, but people supposedly in our press, pundits, streamers. Biden's one of the greatest presidents ever. Why aren't the American people seeing it then? Why is it 79% of people polled say that the country's heading in the wrong direction? Why is that? And I've been saying this for years. If this election is a referendum on the 4 years of Trump's presidency versus the 4 years of the Harris-Biden presidency, Trump wins easily. It's the truth. And I know it's befuddlement from the people I debate. How can that be? What is it? What's the accusation? That the press is in the bag for Trump? Or is it that the American people are incredibly dumb? What's the argument here? They know that it's not as rosy a picture as they have tried to claim and gaslight people into believing. So what happened was, once Biden was out, there was a huge sigh of relief from Democrats, from anti-Trumpers, because the fatigue for having to constantly lie or ignore the record of Joe Biden's administration and his cognitive decline was really taking away the joy. So it didn't matter who the de facto person would have been that was installed. It could have been Pete Buttigieg. It could have been Kamala Harris. It could have been Tim Walz. It could have been Josh Shapiro. Any of these people, the baseline for them would have been so much higher at the onset of their candidacy, once they were named the candidate, because the Joe Biden fatigue was so serious. And so you saw that initial bump. Ironically, it would have been tough. What's the word I'm looking for? The logistics of replacing Biden later would have been harder, but it would have been better as far as votes go, the election goes. You basically were going to get a 2 to 3 month grace period where people were just going to have enthusiasm to have someone different than Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. But it would wear off. That's what I said. And then we would see where we were. That's where we would be. So, in that vein, what happens? Well, Trump's enthused to do more debates. He just embarrassed Joe Biden. So he offers up Kamala Harris 3 debates, including one on Fox. She declines. Nope. Then they set up this situation, do you remember? Where they wanted it to be on their terms, just like Joe Biden did. It's got to be on our terms, the debate. So they agreed to one. I think Kamala Harris did better than Donald Trump in that debate. So at that point, 2 things occurred. One, let me backtrack. The reason that they wanted to hide was, one, they had the enthusiasm, and things at that point in time, when Kamala was first named the candidate, they didn't need the debate. They had the enthusiasm without that, just by nature of her being new and replacing Joe Biden. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, they knew, despite the fact that you've been gaslit again, that Kamala Harris is terrible. Terrible when she's unscripted. She's wretched. I assure you they were scared shitless going into that debate with Trump. And I assure you they breathed a sigh of relief that Trump took the bait. Trump could have spiked the ball on Kamala Harris in a litany of ways, and he dropped the ball. I know the people in my audience say, oh, you're wrong, Trump won that debate. I'm telling you that's what happened. Then they started to see their own internal polling, and they started to see, we're not going to be able to run out the clock. We're not going to be able to. It's not going to be a situation where we could just avoid doing any press conferences, avoid doing any adversarial press. We're going to have to get out there in some way. That's particularly true after the disastrous Tim Walz debate performance. Regardless if the J.D. Vance victory in that vice presidential debate swayed many voters, which I think it did, what it really did was it forced the Kamala team to change their strategy. Because what they realized was, if this is the last interaction between the Trump team and the Kamala team, it's a big L for Kamala. So, all of a sudden, her and Walz start doing the friendly press circuit. That's what happened. That's why you've seen them doing 60 Minutes. That's why you've seen them doing CNN, other CNN pieces. You've seen them go on, She's Your Daddy or whatever. I don't know. But, and by the way, I don't begrudge her that. You should be doing cultural podcasts and things like that. That's why she's been getting out there more. But she's still keeping into her safe bubble. She went on The View. The problem is, she's so bad that even, and so's Tim Walz, on these friendly outlets, they're doing terribly. So she goes on The View. She's asked the easiest question in the world. Her campaign is basically running on two things. Donald Trump is evil and a threat to democracy, and it's time for a change. Because they know that if it's a referendum on Harris-Biden record versus Trump record, they will lose. So they're running as the incumbents on change. Now, when I debate people, as you've seen over and over, they say, oh, things will be different. How will they be different? You mean like the things she ran on in 2020? No, she doesn't believe those anymore. Oh, so what happened? Her values changed? No, her values didn't change. Okay, so then how's she going to be different? What policies will she do different than Biden? You know, she's just the VP now. It'll be different. No specifics, no specifics, no specifics. But the people I'm debating are smart enough, this isn't saying much, to at least take a cue from the Harris team to, oh, we have to say things will be different. We're running they're basically running the Obama playbook. Change, hope and change. But there's two problems. Obama wasn't the incumbent, so he could say change, even though he basically became the de facto third term of George Bush in many ways. And Obama was charismatic, regardless of what you think of him. He was very charismatic. Kamala Harris is the incumbent, de facto, and she has no charisma at all, as is evidenced by the fact that she got 0 primary votes in 2020. She is not charismatic. She's not a policy wonk. So what is she? Well, she checked the right boxes with her race and sex to be VP. They wanted a black woman as VP. And what's her qualifications this time? She's VP. That's it. So it takes a deft hand to try to argue to people how you could claim to be the candidate of change when you're basically the de facto incumbent. And their strategy was, we're just going to run out the clock. No one will ever ask us that question. The only time they would have feared that being brought up was in the debate with Trump. And he did not do a great job. Intel Wild, thank you for the $5, says, VP Harris, how will you end the Middle East war? Well, hey, I grew up in the middle class family, of course. We got a new phrase today. We're getting to the debate. We're just setting the stage, or the interview. We're setting the stage. And so, she's doing so bad that she goes on The View, and they ask her, they've spent millions upon millions of dollars putting ads out that's like, it's time for a change. And so she's asked the most basic of questions. Cool, you're about change. What would you have done differently than Biden? And she sabotages millions of dollars in campaign by saying, nothing. I can't think of anything. Then she gets a do-over on Colbert a couple days later, and she's like, well, here's what would be different. I'm not Joe Biden. I'm not Donald Trump. Right. You're physically a different person. We got that. Thanks so much, Zudem, for $2 says, so does Fox only have clips and not the full thing? I don't know. I watched the full thing on cable on Fox, so. Thanks, everyone, for the donations. I am broke as a joke, so I appreciate the financial donations. So, now she's in a real tight spot. Tim Walz gets asked similar questions by Michael Strahan, of all people. And they're not ready. You can see it. They're so used to just softball questions that any time that someone they think's just a propagandist for them asks even the lightest touch of questions that they should have a basic answer to, they're stymied. They don't know what to say. I believe that's the environment going into the decision to go on Fox News. I think that they're worried internally. Now, I will choose to believe that Donald Trump will still lose this election because I think, despite what polls may or may not show, things like ballot harvesting, things that occurs on election day, will be difficult to overcome. I think people that are willing to lock up their opponent, to say that they're basically like Hitler. 1/3 of Democrats polled said they sort of wish that the assassin's bullet would have taken out Trump. People like that are going to be very dedicated, we'll just say politely, to stopping Donald Trump. However, I am a pessimist by nature. I work best when I have my back against the wall. And so the way that I motivate myself is to always have a chip on my shoulder and assume things aren't going well. Maybe you're different. So I don't know that I'm the best person to go to for predictions. For me, I am motivated to go out and do as much as possible to try to help Donald Trump in my state of Pennsylvania and elsewhere. And I encourage each and every one of you, regardless of what you think the outcome of this election will be, to act like you're losing by 20 points. To drag as many people as you can out to vote. If you're able to do that while thinking, and I think Trump's going to win, so be it. I'm the type of person that likes to think that we're behind at all times. Having said that, it is clear to me at this point that there is not a lot of confidence in the Kamala Harris camp. They are panicking. You see Mark Halperin, who actually just did Tucker Carlson's show, who's sort of a Democrat insider, he's been raising the alarm for over a week now. Things aren't looking good. They're worried. And so now they're throwing Hail Marys. It's the fourth quarter. They're afraid they're going to lose. If you're winning, you're running out the clock. But if you're afraid you're losing, now you start passing the ball. And that's what going on Fox News was about. That sets the stage for why Kamala Harris goes on Fox News. They're worried that their internals aren't that great. And so she needs to be doing things to move the needle. And so what they sought to accomplish were these two things. One, to show that they could go into an adversarial environment and hold their own. That was goal number one. Goal number two was to explain to people in that environment who Kamala Harris is, what her policies will be. That is what I believe the idea behind her going on Fox News was. WW puts it very well. It's a double-edged sword. She needs to be in the public because she's not doing well, but the problem is she does terrible when she's in the public. Right, that's exactly it. I think she failed spectacularly at both of those goals. This was brutal. If you haven't had the time to watch the whole thing, it's only a half an hour. My goodness. Absolutely brutal performance. Far exceeded my expectations for how bad she would be. Absolutely terrible. She does not do anything to alleviate fears or questions that people have of what will Kamala Harris's policies be? How will she differ? If she's running as someone of change, how is it different? What would she have done differently than what happened in the Harris-Biden administration? Not only does she not do that, she is instantly combative. Like instantly. She is attempting to filibuster. It's like she knows from the first question about immigration, oh shit, I don't have good answers for anything, so I'm just going to stream Trump, 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 and try to talk for 15 minutes uninterrupted, forcing Bret Baier to step in and say, but wait a minute, let's get back to the question, so she could say, you're interrupting me. That was her entire strategy. Trump's evil, Trump's a threat to democracy, all the people surrounding Trump say he's really bad, and don't interrupt me. It was brutal. She's all but yelling. Now, there's a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place to be combative. But you have to have a reason. What's Kamala Harris's reason to get combative with Bret Baier right out of the get-go? Now, this is some of my bias showing. But if you're Donald Trump and you've dealt with the press for 8 years now, constantly throwing barbs at you, misrepresenting you, spreading hoaxes about you, being propagandists against you, you're going to have a chip on your shoulder. What's Kamala Harris's chip? And to just jump into like 100 mile an hour on the aggression right out of the gate, it's laughable. And the other thing is, it shows that her goal of showing she could go into an adversarial environment, yeah, her base is going to love it. They're going to be like, yay! That's a strong woman sticking up to the misogynist Republican patriarch Bret Baier. That'll be their narrative, and they're welcome to have that narrative. Those people were voting for Kamala anyways. Who did this move the needle for? It was a disaster. It absolutely was. And one of the attacks they could have on Donald Trump is, well, he's this unhinged madman. And in some senses, regardless of what you think, if you're a Trump supporter, there are many people that are more independent that would consider voting for Trump, but would say, yeah, I think sometimes he can come off as quite unhinged. Kamala looks worse than 99% of the appearances of Trump as far as being unhinged here. It does not do her any favors. Again, it was like in the Walls J.D. Vance debate, where they're trying to say, again, their two big strategies are, we're different, joy and vibes, and things will be different if you vote for us. Well, they don't articulate how they'd be different than Biden. And then their other attack is Trump's this unique Hitlerian threat to democracy. And Tim Walz is sitting there nodding his head with J.D. Vance. Oh, good point with J.D. Vance. It's tough if you're running on this team we're running against is one of the most unique, evil, threatening teams in history to be like, oh, yeah, great. Now, It was nice. It was more human to see Tim Walz and Vance have some areas of agreements. But strategically, with their overarching plan of how they're trying to run this election, not a good look. Someone says, you're high if you think this 30 minutes compares to how Trump's ran his. Yeah, this is the first 30 minutes where she's gone into an adversarial press situation. 99% of the times that Trump's dealing with the press, it's adversarial. For example, someone like Bret Baier would be just as hard on Trump. And then you have the constant barrage of every other network that's brutal against Donald Trump. Kamala Harris is going on The View. Kamala Harris is going on CNN. She's going on Stephen Colbert's show. So when she finally gets out of that bubble and goes to Fox News one time, right out of the gate, 30 seconds in, she's like basically yelling an adversarial. So if you're watching and you're like, well, who is Kamala Harris? Wow. By the way, I'm not surprised by this. I'm surprised at how bad she did, but I'm not surprised at how unhinged she became in an adversarial press situation. It's because many Democrats are the same way. Why? Because they're so used to the press not just being favorable press to them, but literally being on their team, that's the expected nature of things. And so they are legitimately furious and baffled when members of the press ask them adversarial questions. They don't know how to react. I talk about this on my show all the time. When people talk about privilege and things like that, one of the things that I'm privileged as a conservative, as sort of a libertarian adjacent person who went through collegiate debate with very smart people who were all almost all of them were radically left wings. Every minute position that I ever had was challenged. My belief set is challenged in every institution of this country. Almost all the entertainment industry, almost all of academia where I was at, the debate circuit where I was at, corporate press, the way social media is moderated, etc. But it's actually a privilege because you learn to get sharper. You learn to expect that people are going to disagree with you, and it strengthens you and your argument. So many people I've met in life have been in a bubble on the left that they don't know how to handle it when they hear someone on the right articulate sort of positions that they disagree with. They're just like, you're racist. This is ridiculous. And you're seeing that here. Someone like J.D. Vance, one of the reasons he's so good when he's out there talking to the press is because he's used to it. All of the interactions he has with the press are going to be adversarial. So and there are Democrats that are skilled. Pete Buttigieg is pretty good at being able to push back against adversarial questions of press. Obama was okay. But you know who Kamala Harris reminds me of? With becoming unhinged? Joe Biden. See, for Joe Biden, for all the talk of like, oh, he's just this, nice old grandpa, and he's so different to Donald Trump. Trump was this unhinged, angry person. Joe Biden's constantly yelling at the press when they ask difficult questions of him, the rare times where it happens. You remember in the 2020 campaign where he was challenging people to a push-up contest, calling people lying dog-faced pony soldiers? Then once he was president, the couple times where people would ask him a difficult question, he'd start yelling at them. Then the next day you'd see him at a press conference. Remember, he would do this weird whisper thing? It's like they told him, you can't yell at people. So he gets this real condescending whispering, Jack. That's who Kamala reminded me of. Now, she knows she's going into a show that's going to ask her difficult questions. And she had to know, basically, that the questions that were coming were coming. She might not know exactly what they were, but she had to know that she knew someone was going to be asked about the border. She knew she was going to be asked again, how would you be different than Joe Biden? She had to know at some point that it was likely someone would ask her, hey, when did you know that Biden had cognitive decline? And yet she has no answers. And it's because legitimately there are no good answers. But at least if you were a gifted rhetorician, you could come up with an answer to sound better than what she does. Instead, she decides to get angry and filibuster. This entire 30 minutes should be played over and over and over again by Trump's team. That's how bad it was. It was horrible. The specific answers she gave were terrible, but the tone and how she comes off as unhinged makes it even worse. And again, the reason that that matters is because part of their argument is we are joy, we are vibes, Trump's unhinged. And then the one time they get an adversarial press, right out of the gate within 1 minute, she becomes unhinged. Let's talk about the specifics. So her strategy was to filibuster. That was it. Filibuster and just be like, but Trump's horrible. Bret Baier, in his last sort of point that he makes before this wraps up, which took about a half an hour, he says, listen, we're well aware, we've heard you and the Democrats talk about how bad Donald Trump, you and your policies and what you would do. And he's basically all but saying, you didn't answer shit. You just complained about Donald Trump and filibustered. Then in the after show, Bret Baier's talking to sort of some of the other personalities at Fox, and he makes the point. He's like, I understand people are going to say that I interrupted, but at what point? I've never in my career really been in an interview setting like this. Normally you could get a word in edgewise and you could redirect towards the question. She wasn't having it. She was just, I'm going to keep going until I force you to interrupt and then complain about you interrupting. So let's go. I don't have verbatim what was said. I tried. You could go to my X feed and you can see that I was posting out as the interview was going on. So go there and check out exactly what I was saying. Yeah, hit the like button. Thanks so much. But I did write down the major topics, and hopefully things will come to my head as we're going. So the very first question that's asked is about the border. And basically Bret Baier asks a simple question. Do you regret, given what we've seen at the border, the crisis, do you regret immediately coming into office and you and Biden rescinding 90-something of Trump's executive orders, like basically on day one? Now, Kamala Harris starts off with some sort of answer, right? And she says, we had a bill ready to go on day one. Okay. Now, this is an argument that I've heard people try to make previously. But there's two problems with this argument. One, it's basically an amnesty bill. It was a bill that they wanted to push forth that basically would have offered amnesty to like 10 million illegals. So that would be the equivalent if Trump was like, we're like, there's a problem with too many immigrants coming in. And they're like, well, let's all give them, all the ones that are here that came illegally, the right to vote. Let's give them all amnesty. Oh, you didn't like that? Well, then the border's your fault. In other words, they pushed through a bill that they knew wouldn't solve the central issue, and in fact would make it worse. It would provide an incentive for more illegals to come because they'd say, holy shit, they're giving amnesty out now. So it actually, instead of being a tough on, courts had said, and we'll give more money to Border Patrol if we give everyone amnesty. So it's just laughable that this was going to do things seriously. But the other and more important point, and this is what Bret Baier, he tries to make both these points as she sort of starts talking about this talking point, you had a Democrat House and Senate. The Democrats refused to even bring this bill up for a vote. So you failed. You were unable to whip the votes in your own party to even bring this bill to the floor. So given that, how could you use that as an excuse for rescinding the executive orders of Trump, which created the border crisis? Think about it this way. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris think for whatever reason that this bill that they came up with, that they started talking about day one in office, would have correctly solved the border. In fact, we'll say it would have solved it completely. That no one would have even tried to get in after this bill had been passed. And we'll say for the sake of argument that Biden and Harris firmly believe that's the case. Once it was evident to them that even their own party wasn't going to bring this bill for a vote, why would they rescind executive orders that they knew would make the situation worse? Wouldn't you say, well, we're going to keep these executive orders here to make sure the border's secure while we continue to push for this border bill? Isn't that what you would do? You wouldn't say, oh, our bill has no chance of passing because even our own side won't bring it to a vote. Oh, well, let's rescind all these executive orders and watch millions and millions of people pile in. They took direct actions in the rescinding of these executive orders that you could point directly to show how big the crisis became with all of these illegals flooding in. Then they told you over and over, actually the border's not that big of a problem, it's pretty secure, which Bret Baier will later bring up, I'll get to in a second. And now, during an election season, they're like, oh shit, our internals show that this is an important issue. Now we're gonna pretend to care. After 3.5 years of doing nothing, now we're gonna pretend to care. And so when the question's asked, do you regret? Like, one of the first things you did was rescind these orders? Well, we had an idea for a bill and it didn't come at all, and Trump sabotaged it 4 years later. It's laughable. And so, the way the question goes, Bret Baier asks the question, do you regret rescinding these executive orders? And she's like, well, we had a bill ready to go on day one, and it would have solved the situation, and then Donald Trump sabotaged this bill. And Bret Baier tries to get in and is like, wait. The bill you're talking about now was 3.5 years later. And the original bill you pushed, you had Democrats, didn't bring it to a vote. And it was basically amnesty. And so he's listening to Kamala. Now, I will say this is the one point where I think maybe Baier could have gave her an extra 30 seconds. But I understand his frustration because she's completely ignoring the question. Well, one time we suggested a bill, so Trump. But it's like, but that's completely ignoring the question for the reasons that I already told you. So Bret Baier tries to steer back. It's like, but given that there were Democrats and it didn't come up for a vote, and it was basically just amnesty, wouldn't have dealt with the situation, do you think it was a mistake to rescind those executive orders? And she's like, well, you're interrupting me. And she never gives an answer. She just keeps going. Just like if you go back, I know that the video title, I did a call-in show there. I think it was 2 weeks ago at this point. Some person, Alex something or other, called in, who's a streamer, who's more subscribers than me, just to let you know how bad people's decision-making is. That dude that I debated the other day has way more subs on YouTube than me, which is laughable. But he calls in, and all he kept doing, he just repeats talking points. That's all he did. Well, there was a border bill, would have done everything, and Trump, the border union supported it, and Trump sabotaged it. That's it. That's it. And I'm like, yeah, but here's specific problems with that bill. Well, the border bill, they pushed, and Trump sabotaged it. Right, but I'm talking to you about specific problems with that bill. Well, it's still the border bill, and Trump sabotaged it. That's what Kamala Harris is doing. She's just going back to the same talking points. And those talking points work on The View. And they work on Stephen Colbert's show. But they don't work with someone who's adversarial that's like, but wait a minute, that's a non-answer. That doesn't explain why you did nothing for 3 years. And worse than nothing, you rescinded the executive orders that were helping mitigate the problem. Do you think that was a mistake? Here's potential answers she could have gave. No, we don't think it was a mistake. We think those orders were there during COVID, and they were necessary during then, but we saw that we were doing a better job on COVID, and we knew that we had a plan, and so we lifted those restrictions. Was the way things were implemented once they were restricted perfect? No, we think there were mistakes that could have been made, but I've been there for 4 years. I know how to solve those mistakes. I will be working in tandem with the border union to ensure them that we know that their job is very important. We will make sure that they get the resources necessary, and we'll make sure to clean those things up while still being compassionate to the people that are trying to get into this country, because it is the greatest country in the history of the world. See that? Wow, off the top of my head, no planning whatsoever. She could have gave that answer. Or she could have said, yes, it absolutely was a mistake to rescind those orders. Now, you have to understand that the reason we rescinded them was because, unlike Donald Trump and many Republicans, we actually care about the people that are trying to get into this country because it's the greatest country in the history of the world. Sometimes when you are compassionate, you end up making policy decisions that end up sort of backfiring. And that's what happened. There is absolutely criticism to be offered at me and the Biden administration for rescinding those orders before we made sure that we had things on the ground necessary to deal with it. But we assure you, we did it out of a place of compassion, and we have learned from our mistakes. And now we understand that the Trump plan is worse, that he will sabotage plans that would work if it means that he could run on this as a political issue. We are trying to do things that are as compassionate as possible while understanding the voices of the American people that are correctly calling this a crisis. So we will learn and do better going forward on this. See, there's another answer. So she could have said, no, we don't regret rescinding the orders, or she could have said, yes, we do regret. Both of those would be more substantive and assuage people's fears. Okay, at least they recognize the things that occurred. But she can't do it. She can't do it. The only platform they have is, but Trump's evil. That's it. And we're vibes. Which is hard to do when you're yelling and screaming. Again, it's okay to be the surly old man Bernie Sanders type guy if that's your image. If your image is vibes and our opponent's unhinged, it doesn't behoove you the first time you're talking to an adversarial press to just become unhinged. It's bad. So she gives no answer. Then Bret Baier specifically brings up the name of Laken Riley, and unfortunately I don't have the names in front of me, but other people that have been tragically killed by illegals. He brings up that Bill Clinton, while campaigning for her, mentioned that Laken Riley would be alive if there was proper vetting. The one area of this whole thing where I think Kamala does well and says, I feel terrible for their families, she does good there. But then she just is like, yeah, but Trump. And you can see the frustration of Bret Baier as she's just running out the clock on this. He's like, but you're not answering. And this is, again, this is not unusual. This is the same thing that happens when I debate these lefties. I did the hippy dippy 4-on-4 debate about 3-4 weeks ago. Me, Andrew Wilson, the Turk, and Gibbs versus Pisco, I'm really important, Hutch, and Joe Lewis. Same sort of things. What was their talking points on the border? Trump sabotaged the border bill. Trump sabotaged the border bill. And my point was, why did they wait 3.5 years? Why were they all saying the border's not a big problem, it's secure, it's being blown out of proportion? Bret Baier brings that up. You've said multiple times, you said that the border was secure. She says, I've always said that there was a problem at the border. No, she has direct quotes where they're saying the border's secure. When they were talking about the crisis at the border, most of the time what they're talking about isn't the mass influx of illegals that end up getting into the country. They're talking about the crisis of needing to provide services for those people, whether it be educational services, whether it be a pathway to citizenship, whether it be providing citizenship for the dreamers, etc. That's when they say there's a problem with our immigration system. That's what they're talking about. As we watched record numbers of people flood across the border, they continued to tell us it was being blown out of proportion, it was being exaggerated. How many times have I debated people, when you talk about those numbers, they say, but then it wasn't a problem. Actually, we like that. We do need people. You see, that's the difficult position they find themselves in. Someone like me, it's easy. I just tell you what I really think, regardless if it's popular or not. For example, not a popular opinion, though one that I stand behind, that we should disband the FBI. Even some Republicans that I value would say, no, that's too much. And yet, I tell you that's exactly what I'm thinking. The problem with so many of these Democrats is they have to hide what they really believe. They were absolutely fine with these people coming in. Just like Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris said, they want to provide a pathway to citizenship. They'll call you a racist if you point this out, that they're mass importing people that they eventually want to give the right to the vote, that will not only change the demographics in this country, but it'll be people that don't have a historical connection to the country and sort of have an appreciation for some of the things that are historical in our country, such as the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. That they seem to be attacking people like Hillary Clinton attacking the First Amendment, John Kerry attacking the First Amendment, talks of censoring disinformation online, changing the First Amendment, all the constant attacks we see on the Second Amendment. If you bring in 20 to 30 million new voters that don't really understand the importance or the historical context of that, oh boy, then you're far more likely to be able to change those things. And entrench yourself in a permanent sort of establishment class that could rely on those people for votes. But that's racist. You can't talk about it. I'm not even talking about the racial makeup of people. It could be the same if you're importing 10 million Norwegians. Now, it is true, if you're bringing in people with far different cultures, such as Haitians, that it's going to lead to even more problems. Nonetheless, you can see that there are problems in importing people regardless of what they're from if they have different backgrounds. They tell you it's not happening, and then they say, yeah, it's happening, it's a good thing. How many times have I been in the debates? Well, actually, I don't think it's a problem anyways. We need this many people. We need these people coming in. Right. They're great. They're better than Americans. They're hardworking. It's not happening. But if it is, it's a good thing. That's the truth. The truth is that Mayorkas and Harris and Biden were absolutely perfectly fine and happy with the mass influx of illegals that were coming across the border. They were happy that it was happening. Fit their agenda perfectly. And now in an election year, they have to go, oh my goodness, this is a crisis. We were trying all along to deal with it. Well, which is it? You were trying to deal with it and failing spectacularly for 3.5 years? Or you didn't think it was a problem? So Kamala Harris has no answer. She's just filibustering and yelling. She has no answer. None. Again, even the most articulate establishment-defending Kamala voters, the best they'll be able to say is, well, this original bill that Kamala and Biden were pushing was a good bill in 2021. It was good. And you'll be like, okay, but the Democrats didn't even bring it to the floor. Now what? Shouldn't they have kept the executive orders until then? And then they'll just say, but Trump sabotaged the bill. He sabotaged the bill. Right, that's 3.5 years later. What happened for 3.5 years? And then, like Hutch was saying, remember in that debate, he said, well, now the problem at the border, it's gotten much better because Biden issued executive orders. Oh, so that's all it would have taken? That seems to be an admission that it was a mistake for Biden to rescind Trump's executive orders. If things are better now, why did Biden wait for 3.5 years to do it? They controlled the House and Senate for 2 years. When it was obvious that they weren't going to push through a border bill, why didn't he start issuing executive orders? Why instead did they gaslight you that things were pretty smooth? What they did do was attack Border Patrol agents. Remember that hoax? The picture that it looked like the Border Patrol agent was whipping the noble refugee that was coming across? Turned out it was entire bullshit. But they still punished that Border Patrol agent. That's the sort of stuff that they were doing. So that was the first area. That's it. So you can't blame Kamala. I guess she's, again, it's why someone like me should run for office, because I'm excellent and I'd be able to answer these questions easily. But she sucks. And she did terribly. So she's already becoming unhinged. Bear's like, okay, we got to move on from the border. I don't know if we are getting the rest of these in order. He's showing clips as well. So he shows a clip from The View and from Stephen Colbert where Kamala Harris is asked, what would you do differently than Biden, which we talked about previously? And she says in those clips basically nothing. I can't think of anything I would have done differently. And Bret Baier asks, if you're the candidate of change, you're saying it's time to turn the page. What are we turning the page from? You've been there for 3.5 years. And she just says, well, I mean, turn the page on Trump's rhetoric. Huh? First off, that's not what she means. They may mean that in part, but many times when you see these ads, they're talking about, Oh, the prices at the grocery stores are out of control. It's time for a change. It's time for something different. What does Trump's rhetoric have to do with your groceries? And Bret Baier pushes back and he's like, at one point he's like, what? And he's like, I don't think I understand what you're saying. She's like, well, let me explain it to you. And Bret Baier even said afterwards, he's like, I legitimately didn't know what she was talking about. I'm like, okay, you're saying we now have to turn the page. And I'm like, but you're there now, so wouldn't turn the page mean moving on from you? And you're like, yeah, but Trump 8 years ago. What? It's just incoherent rambling. And she's just getting more and more aggressive and more filibustering. Then she's asked about specific things. She's asked, like, she's given a chance at this point, before we get to these other specific things. She has a chance to specifically address, well, here's a couple things I would have done different than Joe Biden. We've already talked about the border, which she didn't say anything. And so instead, she's just like, well, I assure you that a Harris administration will be different than a Biden administration. Okay, give us the specifics. Because we just showed the clip of you saying you can't think of anything you would have done differently. So how will it be different? In fact, when Colbert asked you, you were just like, well, I'm physically a different person than Joe Biden. Right. Which is technically true, but the lowest bar possible to talk about what your difference would be. And she's just like, why be different than Trump? Trump's terrible. And again, the point that Baier makes at the end, yeah, we know that. We know that the Democrats and the Kamala Harris campaign has told us over and over again what a shithead Donald Trump is and all the reasons that you guys think he's a threat to democracy and he's really bad. But what about you? Like, you're here to talk about you. How will you be different? What does this look like? You're saying turn the page. How is it going to be different? Well, it will be different. I won't be the same as Biden, okay? Because Trump's terrible. And we're turning the page on Trump's rhetoric. I challenge anyone, based on the answers she gave there, what's going to be different? Has she anywhere articulated any policy she would have done differently than Joe Biden? Anywhere. Now again, this puts the Democrats in a difficult position because they are trying to lie to you about how popular and great of a president Joe Biden was. He's not. And again, this is where Bret Baier brings up 79% of people in the particular poll he's looking at says that America's going in the wrong direction. That's really bad if you're the incumbent. But the Democrats I debate are like, Biden's doing great. He's fantastic. Okay, so then they're not going to work. Again, this guy I debated the other day. He's like, wow, clearly she's just VP. She'd be different. And I'm like, oh, so you're admitting that the policies of Biden are bad? No, they're good. They're good policies. But she gives no substantive answer here at all. So for her, it's going to be different because I'm not Biden, okay? And we're turning the page on Trump's rhetoric. And when I ask specifically, but people think that Biden's policies are your policies and Biden's policies have taken the country in the wrong direction. How will you turn the page on that? What will be different? Well, we're turning the page on Trump's rhetoric from 8 years ago. That's it. That is, to anyone who's being remotely objective, a horrible answer. You are the de facto, and again, it's not me, and this is what that person the other day, he's like, well, it's clear you don't know that a VP is different than the president. She didn't have any control over all this stuff. Don't take my word for it. Take Kamala Harris's word for it. Take Joe Biden's word for it. They're the ones who keep telling us. Joe Biden just said the other day, all the important decisions, Kamala was right there with me. She's the last person in the room. Kamala Harris says, I can't think of anything I would have done differently. I was there the whole time I was working with them. These are the things that they themselves have said about Kamala Harris. Then she's asked about specific things. Her endorsement of federal money to pay for transgender surgeries in prison. When asked about these specific flip-flopping, she now has another phrase very similar to, well, I came from a middle-class family. She says, I will follow the law. She keeps saying. So anytime differences are brought up, but you said this in 2020 about these trans surgeries, what do you say now? I would follow the law. And Bret Baier at one point is like, but you'll have a say in that. And it's very interesting, right? Because it's not as if, for example, we haven't seen the Obama administration starting that decided they weren't going to follow the law. Nah, we're not going to prosecute aggressively or enforce all the laws in the books of immigration laws. The idea that they wouldn't have a say as a presidential administration, if that's really the claim, like, well, there's nothing we can do, all we do is enforce the law, then why, what sort of pitch is this to vote for her? Well, we can't do anything. Our hands are tied based on what Congress does. That's it. That's all we can do. So if Congress says that we can't have federal funding for transgender surgeries in prison, then we'll follow that. Yeah, but you're going to use the bully pulpit to push for something. So are you for this or are you against it? She doesn't say. I'll just follow the law. And that's how she'll discuss all of these discrepancies from what she believed in 2020 till now. Well, I'd follow the law. Then she says, well, during the Trump administration, this law was on the books as well with the trans. And Bret Baier's like, yeah, but there were 0 surgeries that occurred, and Trump's team said they were unaware of that and they wouldn't have supported it. You seem to support it. And Kamala says, and this will be, and Bret Baier's team correctly pointed this out, this probably, I don't know if you caught it, but this is probably the line that was the absolute worst line that Kamala Harris made. She says, you're responsible for the things that occur during your administration. And Trump's team, I hope they have someone cutting that line right now. Yep, sounds good. Okay, so Trump's team's responsible. I don't know what the numbers are. Bret Baier's claiming that their numbers show there were 0 trans surgeries in prison when Trump was president. But if you're responsible for the things that occurred during your administration, let's see what the Harris-Biden administration is responsible for. The border crisis, inflation, wars that are occurring across the world. But that's going to be their line now. You were against fracking. Now what? I will follow the law. Yes, but will you push to have fracking banned or not? As the leader of your party, as the president, I'll follow the law. It's laughable. She keeps saying that Trump says there is an enemy within and that he will use the military to go after Americans. Now, this is personally one of my favorite lines of attacks. Anytime you hear the Democrats talk about Trump weaponizing the executive to go after his opponents. Because that's exactly what the Democrats have been doing since 2016, to go after Trump. The FBI illegally spied on Trump's campaign. They have been investigating Trump and his surrogates nonstop. Hell, even prior to that, the IRS was going after conservative groups under Lois Lerner. The FBI is targeting parents at school board meetings, pro-life people, whistleblowers coming out from agencies like the FBI and the IRS saying they're being targeted for speaking up against this sort of stuff. Working in tandem with social media companies, either directly telling them to suppress information or heavily implying that they need to suppress certain sorts of claims that they don't like. But Trump's going to use the military to go after people that don't vote for Trump, Americans. Now, first off, the idea that Trump is uniquely saying that Americans are the problem and somehow that's different than the Harris-Biden administration is laughable. Remember Biden's speech in front of the All Red where he's pounding his fist, standing there in front of the Marines? Remember that? Talking about the dangers of MAGA, the extremist of MAGA. How many times have we heard it, run-of-the-mill Democrats say that MAGA is a threat, that the MAGA voters are a threat? How many times have we heard that? Secondly, we've seen the FBI actually deployed. We saw internal memos suggesting, whistleblowers suggest that the FBI was going after Catholics, was going after parents at school board meetings. We could see that there is an attempt to use agencies to work in tandem with social media to censor people that they dislike. But now all of a sudden, Trump's saying the enemy's from within. That's the Democrat argument about MAGA. Hell, all you got to do is listen to people like Destiny. They'll tell you. They just say, well, yeah, January 6th, all those people deserve it. All of them deserve it. Even the nonviolent, they deserve it. They are a threat. MAGA's extreme. It's dangerous. So yes, it's okay for us. But oh boy, if you say we're extreme or a threat and want to do the same things, that's outrageous. You can't do that. Then she starts to allude to people like General Miley that says, I might be court-martialed and blah, blah, blah. Let there be an investigation. Isn't that the standard that's set forth? I think that he probably should have been drummed out of office when he admitted that he called our biggest threat and geopolitical rival in China and told China that if Trump ordered some sort of preemptive strike on China, that he would inform China beforehand. Now he's worried. Whoa, isn't that funny? All of a sudden they're worried about investigations into these sort of groups. They had no problem investigating. Steve Bannon's in jail right now. They had no problem investigating sitting members of Congress that happen to be MAGA. But oh boy, if Trump gets in, he might do the same. That would be terrible. That's anti-American. So Bret Baier plays a clip. He's like, Harris Faulkner asked Trump about this today, and he's like, no, I'm not going to use the military. That's absurd. Actually, the DOJ is coming after me. And Kamala Harris becomes incredulous at this. Bret Baier's like, well, that's like him directly answering that question. She's like, come on, Bret. Come on. You know that's not the answer. You know that's not the answer to the question. You didn't play the question. You didn't play it. By the way, they made similar arguments to this in 2016. Remember? He's going to lock up gay people or kick brown people out of the country. How'd that work out? At this point, she's basically yelling. Then the last area, the interview that I thought was worth discussing, Bret Baier asked her, at what point did you realize that Joe Biden had some mental issues, some cognitive issues? And again, first off, it's surreal. It's surreal that we're months out of Kamala Harris and the Democrats forcing Joe Biden. I mean, if you just take a step back, forget about the election for a minute, and think about what has happened here in a historical context. We are on the cusp of a potential war with Iran that could lead us into World War III. We're on the cusp of a war with Russia over Ukraine. We have all sorts of problems back here at home. Natural disasters that are occurring, a border crisis, an economic crisis. And we have no clue who's running this country. None. It's not Joe Biden. He's basically forced out. Now, they'll gaslight you and say, oh, no, Joe Biden made the decision himself. He did not. He was pressured out. And what we're told is, well, it's good for America that he was pressured out because he might have lost to Trump because he doesn't have the cognitive abilities to campaign. But he does have the cognitive abilities to be president. Huh? Has anyone bothered to try to explain that? I mean, if I'm trying to devil's advocate, I'd be like, well, he's good now, but 4 years from now, he might not be good. He might not be able to make it through 4 years. But that's laughable. We saw how bad he is. He's not good now. He's not. We all know it. Again, the people that tried to say, well, when Jake Tapper came out and was after the debate and was all of a sudden like, oh, there's a problem. You had all these members of the press talking. Remember, you had George Clooney came out and was like, we knew right in 2021, we did a fundraiser. It's like, whoa, something's wrong with this guy. So you had all these Democrats saying, well, at least now they're being honest. Now they're saying, no, they're not, because they're not calling for him to be removed right now. They don't care. It's all political to them. They don't care. So they're right back to, oh, he's well enough to be president right now. I don't know if he was just as bad, but he was bad in 2020. He was. Again, you had articles that were coming out back in 2021. A bunch of insider Democrats were like, ooh. So when did Kamala Harris realize that there were cognitive issues? She's asked about this, and Bret Baier's like, you said that you saw him every week. You were one of the last people in the room. So when did you notice a problem? And she's, again, acts like, like she wasn't ready for the question, which is laughable. How did we make it this far, and this is the first time that she's really been asked? So finally it happens. The most basic question that should have been asked day one when Kamala Harris took the candidacy. Okay, if he wasn't fit enough to be the candidate, when did you realize there was a problem? And why is he still the president? That question should have been asked day one, but it wasn't. So finally, months later, we get to the question. You would say, oh, they have to have an answer ready at this point, right? And she's like, oh, Biden's great. Like, oh, I'm with Biden all the time. He's a good man. And Donald Trump's the worst. Donald Trump's bad. That's it. That's our answer. How is that an answer? On a fundamental level, how could you ever believe someone that's gaslighting you and lying to you so blatantly? No, we didn't pressure him out, and he's great. He's doing fine. What? And they'll shamelessly lie to you. Again. They'll shamelessly lie to you. Oh, Trump's got cognitive issues. Trump's the problem. The same people that lied to you. Now instantly, and again, what they realized was, always accuse them of what you yourself was doing. It's a weakness to them that correctly people were identifying Joe Biden's cognitive issues. So as soon as they got him out, they're like, oh, your guy Trump, he's the one with cognitive issues. I see it just came up on my X feed. Sonsel, lefty that used to call in, says, Trump's right now only doing softball interviews. First off, Trump has done more adversarial press interviews probably when it comes to press conference and stuff more than any modern politician, number one. Second, in this campaign season, he's done all sorts of adversarial. He did a women's issue today. Granted, it was on Fox with Harris Faulkner, but those are certainly a crowd that traditionally wouldn't be super in favor of him. Abject Fool, thanks for $10, says Kamala should have taken the opportunity to put Trump on notice. True that. That would have been the real thing to do. He just got interviewed on Bloomberg. That was a contentious interview the whole time, where Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal people that were going at him the whole time. What's Kamala Harris done? Fox and CBS, places like 60 Minutes that brutally butchered and edited her answers to make her look better than what she is. But they don't care. They'll just blatantly lie to you. They don't care. They don't. They stay on point. Watch someone like Pisco. Go to his X feed. Every time Trump tweets something out, Pisco will put, resign, for shame, you're a disgusting man, plead guilty to your crimes. Verbatim, 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 verbatim. They don't believe the shit. They just repeat it verbatim. Do you ever notice when you see like these left-wingers that are protesting things, like the worst of Antifa and Black Lives Matter? They just repeat slogans over and over and over. That's all they're capable of. That's what they do. Biden's cognitive health was fine. He's fine. Your conspiracy. It's cheap fakes. It's cheap fakes. It's cheap fakes. Biden needs to step out of the race. It's Trump's cognitive problems. Kamala Harris is doing fine. She's doing just fine. She doesn't have to do adversarial press. She doesn't have to. She does it and Trump won't. The border's secure. It's great. The border's doing great. The border's a crisis and it's Trump's fault. This was a disaster. This Kamala interview was a disaster. I recommend all of you watch it. And you will see the normal gaslighters that'll say, Kamala did great. It was an ambush. The same people that for 4 years of the Trump presidency, every time he got up to the podium, where he did press conference after press conference, he would stand up there for an hour, unscripted, and just members of the press screaming at him, answer every one of them. They were cool with that. I don't see what the problem is. The press is very fair. That's their job. But one time, Kamala Harris goes on Fox News, and it's like, this was an ambush. It was an ambush. Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Any other specifics that people had? I thought it was bad. I thought stylistically she did bad. She was super combative right out of the gate. She was all but yelling. Again, you might say, but Rob, sometimes you yell a lot and stuff. Yeah, but I'm not the one running on happiness and vibes and joy and that my opponent yells too much. And I have substantive answers to the things I'm talking about, unlike Kamala Harris. She did terribly. She would have been better off not doing this interview. It's literally that simple. And the people that are going to try to gaslight you, oh, she did great, this was wonderful, are full of shit. And they know it. They know that it was not good. They know it. You see, that's the difference between me and them. I'm not saying I'm always right, and you may disagree with me at times, but I'll tell you, I have every incentive in the world. I'm being completely transparent. I'm voting for Donald Trump. I'm doing my best to help Donald Trump win. Trump wasn't my first pick in the primary. I was transparent and honest with that. He won the primary. I'm pushing for him. So I had every incentive in the world when Trump debated Kamala Harris to say, oh yeah, Trump won. I didn't. I took heat from my own audience. All I could do is be honest. That's it. I've analyzed debates all the time where I'm like, I think the left winger won this debate. These people are so bad. How many of them were saying Tim Walz won that debate? Laughable. There were people of them trying to say that Joe Biden won that debate against Donald Trump. A debate that was so historically bad that it forced him out. And there were people saying, actually, Biden won. Even won that blatant. The Walz-Vance debate wasn't much better for Tim Walz. And yet, I think Walz won. So are you surprised? I would love to see a Venn diagram of the people that said that Tim Walz won that debate that are going to say, Kamala did great today. I'd love to see that Venn diagram. I bet it'd be a perfect circle. She did terribly. It was bad optically. It was bad when it comes to the actual issues and the specifics that were talked about. It did not achieve their goal. No one watching that's like, oh, now I know more. What the best you could say is, well, if people tuned in, they could have heard some strong points about things that are wrong with Donald Trump. But is any of that new? Was there anyone who hasn't heard Kamala Harris or a million other Democrats make those exact same talking points? Well, there was a border bill, but Trump sabotaged it. We know. We've heard a billion times. It's been answered a billion times. So what's the point? What's the point of doing this interview if you're just going to repeat? The Bret Baier did fine. Maybe jumped the gun a little too much the first time that he interrupted. I don't think so, though, because I think it was obvious she wasn't answering the question. He was trying to get her back on task with the specific question about rescinding the executive orders of Trump 4 years ago. But other than that, he asked adversarial questions that people want answers to. Those were the sort of questions that people want answers to. For me, I've been begging someone to ask her, okay, when did you notice that Biden was cognitively impaired? He asked that. I've been begging someone to ask, do you think it was what would be different from the Biden administration? Do you regret what happened with the executive orders being rescinded? on the border. You say you're a candidate of change. Change what? Those are the questions he asked. And I think he was frustrated. It's evident that he was frustrated because he feels that he had more to ask and she was just filibustering and not answering anything. And it was clear that he was frustrated, which is why at the end where he's like, listen, we brought you on here to talk about you and you just want to talk about Donald Trump. That's it. You didn't really, and she's like, well, go to my website. So, I don't know. I just think objectively it was a disaster. I recommend everyone watch it. I think that Trump's team ought to be pushing this interview and clips from it over and over and over and over again. She is literally one of the most unimpressive politicians I have ever seen. Listen, I'm not a fool. I know a lot of politics, and what makes you a good politician is smoke and mirrors. We don't have a system where the person with the best ideas becomes the elected leader. It's just not the way it is. The skills you need to get elected don't necessarily translate into the skills that would make you an effective politician. In other words, being a good showman, being a good rhetorician, having high charisma, those things don't necessarily mean, okay, now you've won. Can you be a good governor? Can you be a good senator? Can you be a good president? Not necessarily. Those aren't the same qualities. Some people have both of those. Some people have one set and not the other. There's an awful lot of people that I think would be tremendous leaders, but don't have the wherewithal to get elected. They don't have the charisma. They don't have the tools necessary to get people enthused to vote for them. But most national level politicians, you can point to some things that you're like, okay, here's your strong suit. Barack Obama, very charismatic. Same with Donald Trump. In completely different ways. But incredibly charismatic, particularly to the people that are already predisposed to liking them. You have people like J.D. Vance, great debater. People that are good at handling the press. You have people that are shrewd negotiators, like a Nancy Pelosi, that's operating shrewdly behind the scenes. What is Kamala Harris's strength? What is it? Newsom, very slimy, slippery guy, but man, he presents himself very well. He looks the part of a politician. He speaks well. What's Kamala Harris? He does present like a slime ball, but you're predisposed to not like him. There's an awful lot of people that like what they see with. She's terrible. She was the person who was the right person at the right time. She was a good VP pick because she wouldn't outshine Joe Biden as far as being more intelligent or more of a policy wonk than him. And she brought him votes and enthusiasm from women and from black people. And they were open about the fact that they were heavily considering a black woman as his running mate. And she was the safest option. There were other black women that are Democrats that no doubt would be far more qualified in many ways to be VP or to be president. But you don't want someone that outshines Joe Biden. You don't want someone with different ideas than Joe Biden. Kamala Harris is, I guess her greatest asset other than sort of her demographics is that she's an empty suit. She could be whatever you want her to be. That's who Kamala Harris is. You want me to say to ban fracking today? Okay. Oh, tomorrow you want me to say that the last thing we should do is ban fracking? Sure. Walls are racist and terrible? Fine, no problem. Oh, now I should support a wall? Great. That's what makes her the quintessential Democrat candidate. She's just an empty suit. But you would at least like your empty suit to go out there and be able to put on a smiling face and be charismatic and be likable. Kamala Harris is not that. She is not. Joe Biden was at one point. But by the time we get to 2020, he's having cognitive issues. And so what was the strategy? Basically keep them behind closed doors as much as possible. Basically run the campaign the last few months out of your basement. That's what the Kamala Harris strategy was. Except this time, their internal numbers showed this might not be enough to get us across the finish line. And so they keep putting her out there, and the problem is, the more they put her out there, the worse she does. Is there anyone out there that thinks that this interview helped Kamala Harris? I believe there will be people that say it doesn't hurt her. But is there anyone that thinks that this actually helps her? Is there anyone that thinks that like people in Pennsylvania or Michigan or North Carolina or Georgia or Nevada or any of these other swing states watch this and went, okay, yeah. Anyone? The only potential way that that's possible is also the only thing I could say with the Trump-Harris debate, which is there could theoretically be someone that's like, I feel that the moderation was too egregious, and so therefore I have some sympathy. I said that about Trump. It was so evident that the ABC moderators were basically just debaters against him that there were a lot of people whose big takeaway, because Kamala didn't do great, even though I thought she outperformed Trump, that the biggest takeaway was, but these moderators are literally on Kamala's side, and that's shit. And that sort of proves the overarching theme of the Trump candidacy, which is like there are all these institutions that are ganged up against him and people like you. And that's going to be the major takeaway from the Trump-Harris debate. At this point, it's the specifics of it are basically done with. It's already baked into the polls. It's already baked into the votes. So what's going to be the lasting impression? That's going to be the lasting impression, the moderation. Maybe you could make that claim. Maybe there will be people that will say, I thought Bret Baier was too heavy-handed, and so I sympathize with Kamala and it makes me more likely to vote for her. I would say that has to be few and far between. And it would have to be a very specific person that like never watches interactions with the press with Trump, because almost every interaction with the press with Trump is that way. Hell, the Bloomberg interview was similar, with an adversarial host that was just grilling him. Your tariffs will be bad. They'll hurt the economy. They're going to do this. And Trump's more affable, pushing back. Vina, thanks so much for the $5, says, Pisco just said he heard whispers that people are freaking out because Kamala did so well. I'm not surprised. Pisco, one of the best gaslighters out there. He has no shame. He also thought Tim Walz won the debate against, what did I tell you? Venn diagram, the people that said Walz beat Vance in that debate are going to say Kamala did great. I'm sure Pisco's got his ear to the ground. Now, in fairness, Vita just said that. That could be untrue. I haven't seen Pisco say that, so. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was his take. So, that's it. That's sort of what I thought. Any chance that Pittsburgh and or Philadelphia will go red? No. There's a significant chance that they could go more red than they did in 2020, which will make Pennsylvania go red. But no, I don't think. Pittsburgh would have a closer chance. Like, Pittsburgh has elected Republican mayors, but definitely Philadelphia, no chance in hell. And Pittsburgh, I would say no. You know, it's clear that the internal polling, you know, like, take polling with a grain of salt. You really have to take it with a grain of salt. But man, when you look at some of these things, it's really amazing. Like, so you can see that the Real Clear Politics average for swing states are now favoring Donald Trump. The betting markets are now favoring Donald Trump. The Real Clear Politics general election ballot is still favoring Kamala Harris, though everything's trending more towards Trump. But there's definitely still polls that are all over the place. And it's amazing when you look at these polls. So they're all over my feeling is what happens with the polls are that the average poll, this is what happens. They project the image that they want for their audience. And then the closer you get to the election, the closer they'll say 50-50 toss-up with a margin of error of like 3 points. Because then they save face. They're like, well, you know, we knew it was going to be really close, so that seems to be the trend of what happens. So the polls that had Harris up like 9, by the time we get to election day, we'll have her up like 2 or 0, etc. Rasmussen's trying to do sort of, I see that their poll today that's like sort of an aggregate that's trending directions has in the popular vote Trump up one. That's a devastating loss for Kamala Harris. Because Kamala Harris, in general, obviously things could break unique in certain states, but in general, Kamala Harris needs to win the popular vote by about 2 to 3% to win in those swing states. So if she's losing by 1, the popular vote, it'd be very difficult for her to win. Like, it'd all be over. But then there are other polls, such as there was a Marist poll that had Kamala Harris up 5 points. But then when you looked at the crosstabs, it was like they oversampled Democrats by like 9%, or 9%. Like, I don't even know how, like, again, I'm not saying, I'm still predicting Trump will lose, but in what world, if you're a pollster, do you think that the electorate is so skewed that there's 9% more Democrats than Republicans? Gallup came out today, and depending on how you look at the information, said that the electorate is 3 to 7% more Republican than Democrat. So if that number is remotely accurate, let's take the low end and say 3% more Republican than Democrat. That means that the Marist poll oversampled Democrats by 12. And they only have her winning like by 5. That would mean that the actual number would be close to Trump winning by like 5 or 6. That's brutal. Why would you? And it's clear that oversampling like that, it would be equally ridiculous if someone did a poll where they oversampled Republicans by like 7. What's the point? Just so you can have it out there, right? So that the donor, because it's got to look, you got to speak to your audience. You got to get those donor money still rolling in. Get those ad buys still rolling in. Ultimately, the betting markets and the polls mean nothing. What's going to matter is who has the most enthusiasm to get out there and vote, whether it be early through mail-in ballots, whether it be on election day, and what sort of mail-in ballots and policies are being allowed for votes that are occurring. Do we get tens of thousands of ballots that come in from overseas where no one had to prove that they lived in the state that they're voting in? Will ballot harvesting operations be incredibly strong, particularly in inner city areas? Are the polls just wrong? Are people lying in the polls? Are the methodologies in the polls screwed up because they haven't taken into account the mass change in voting styles that we have now? I don't know. So I'm continuing to be pessimistic that I don't think Trump's going to win this thing. I don't. But I'm biased towards that position because that encourages me to work harder. That's what it does. So that's the way I'm approaching it. I think it is clear that the Democrats are nervous. What's his name? Mark Halperin, again, Democrat, sort of internal Democrat strategist type guy. He's been out there raising the alarm bells. Look, the internal's not looking good in places like Michigan. It's not good. Doesn't mean Kamala's dead in the water, but it's not good. They're not super confident. He did an interview with Tucker Carlson, and you should look this up. I reposted it so you can find it on X. There's like a 3-minute clip. It's surreal, and it's absolutely spot on accurate. So this is the last thing I'll say today, and I'll talk about this more a lot as we get closer to election day, the general theme of what I'm going to be discussing here. Halperin says, Tucker's like, what do you think will happen if Democrats lose? And Halperin says, I think we'll see the biggest mental health crisis in the history of this country. And he's absolutely right. Is he Newsmax? Is that where he's from? He's absolutely right. He's like, people are going to lose their minds. And Tucker says, when there's mental health crisis, there'll be violence. He's like, yeah, there will be violence. I hope I'm wrong, but there probably will be. And he's right. And he's like, at this point, there are so many Democrats that literally think Trump's Hitler. They refuse to believe that in a legitimate election that Donald Trump could win. They refuse to believe that there could be millions of people that would vote for Donald Trump and he wins in this system that we have set up. And they won't know how to process it. And by the way, that was true of 2016. when you saw all the riots and all the gnashing of the teeth and the screaming. I think this election is very important. I think particularly sort of never Trump Republicans, people that favor someone like DeSantis. Full disclosure, I supported DeSantis over Trump in the primary. I did. I think they're making a tremendous mistake. I think, as always, I'm biased because my big issue is corruption and authoritarianism in our government. I think that there is likely to be a crackdown on free speech, the likes we haven't seen for years, if Donald Trump doesn't win. I think you'll see people like Elon Musk find themselves. You remember Telegram, the guy that runs Telegram, and he was arrested in France, I believe? And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, okay, well, he's out on bail or whatever. And then this news story came out like a week or two later. It's like, oh, now Telegram's going to have a back door for authorities. Right. That's the same shit that will be done to Elon. They're going to turn the screws on him to the point where he's going to have to give up control of X. They want control over information. That's what they want. They liked the COVID years. They liked the ability to censor information that they found inconvenient for them. And they're going to keep pushing for it. And I think we're likely to see a situation where if Kamala wins, that those things become reality. And that voices like mine, it's not necessarily that I'm going to end up in prison. That's not what I'm saying. But you'll see even more of the chicanery, the demonetization, the shadow banning, the straight up banning, etc., etc. And voices like mine and thousands upon thousands of others will go to the wayside. And there'll be more control of information. And that'll make it more difficult to ever win an election going forward. Or to have impressive cultural changes that we need, that I think are also positive, which we're seeing. There will be people, based on how effective they are, that lawfare will be used to go after. So bigger streamers than me, your Steve Bannon type people of the world, they'll be gone after. Trump will be gone after. Trump's family will be gone after. Lawyers for Trump will be gone after. It's bleak. We'll continue to see the border crisis worsen. We'll see more and more money siphoned out of our country to countries like Ukraine. Some of that stuff may happen if Trump wins anyways. Trump winning and Republicans winning is only step one of many, many steps that need to occur. I'm not convinced by any stretch that Trump will win. I'm not convinced if he does, he'll do the right things. I'll push for it. Winning step one. So all that's to say, when I talk about the importance of this election, I'm very serious. But I'm not going to have a mental health crisis if Trump loses. I'm going to say, this sucks. What can I do to get better? What can I take stock of in my life that's more important than this? I have it easy because I'm lucky. I'm one of the luckiest people that have ever lived. I have Jojo Geeker, that's my brother. I have two tremendous brothers, a tremendous sister. I just went and saw my sister play. She started college. She plays tenor saxophone in her college band. I went and saw her play with my mom and my wife and my son this weekend. It was awesome. A lot of fun. That was Sunday I went out. I have the best wife in the world. I have the best son in the world. We're all relatively healthy. My neighbors are cool. My parents are still alive. They're cool. My in-laws are great. I love the neighborhood I live in. Right now, I'm financially doing well enough that even though I'm broke, and I can afford the mortgage. I can afford to keep the lights on. I'm not missing many meals. Truly, if I died tomorrow, I was amongst the luckiest people that have ever lived. I'd say that I don't deserve any of it. I don't. I'm shit. I'm flawed. I'm sinful. There's millions of people that deserve this level of luck and happiness more than I am. But I got it. So for me, it's easy. I take stock of it. That's okay. I'll be all right. I'll be all right. And maybe I won't. Maybe you say, yeah, but Rob, the government keeps getting more authoritarian. Eventually they'll crack down on you. Maybe. And I'll continue to do my best to peacefully push back against that in the most effective ways that I can. But I'm not going to lose my head. I'm not going to all of a sudden become a depressed person. It's not who I am. It happened. Do the best you can. You move forward. You know, someone I like, what's his name? Kelly. Why can't I think of his first name? Great guy I follow on X. He says, you know, people always say, this is the most important election of our lifetime. He's like, you know what the most important election of our lifetime was? 2008. That was the most important. When Barack Obama got in there and was able to change the culture at our institutions to basically be radical left-wingers, it may be too late. That might have been the beginning of the end for our great country. Maybe. It doesn't mean you give up. No, not Greg Kelly. I can't think of him. I can picture him too. Big tall guy with the beard. He's always calling people communists. He's great. Maybe it's not Kelly. I thought it was. So, you know, Stephen Banel, that's it. That's the name. So don't freak out. It's not who we are. I'm not going to be screaming at the sky like the lefties that you saw. I know that I'm going to get a heap of shit if Trump loses. There's going to be lefties that are coming on my show. Ha, 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 fuck you, blah, blah, blah. That's cool. They did it to me in 2020. They did it to me in 2022. The only election nationally that's ever gone the direct... Jesse Kelly, that's it, Vita. Yeah. The only election nationally that's ever gone the way that I wanted was 2016. So I'm used to being a perpetual loser when it comes to our institutions. I don't mind the left that wants to dunk the ball, make fun of me when my side loses time and time again. That's what it's like to challenge powerful institutions. You're going to lose most of the time. Cool. Am I sure God wins? Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I'm sure we win on this earth. Life's not a comic book. You're not guaranteed a happy ending in this world. If you're Christian, you know the answer. You know how things end up. That doesn't mean that that's how it ends up here. And if you're not Christian, you don't know how it ends up. And you're still not guaranteed a victory. You know, one of the most important lessons I ever had in life, I had a little bit of main character syndrome at one point in my life. So when I was debating in college, you know, I was kicking ass. I was doing very good. And it was a good story. Rarely did you have someone that was competitive at the top levels of policy debate that didn't debate in high school, that went to a small state school. It's not very common. I'm not saying it's unheard of, but it's not very common. And so my second to last year of debate, we're trying to qualify for the national debate tournament, which is the top 72 teams in the country. But each school can send up to 3 teams. So really you're talking about 30 to 40 schools. And here we are at a little state university, Clarendon University. And we're going to make it, damn it. We're going to make it. And it was like the tournament was at Mary Washington University. We had to place, like, I think in the top 5 teams there, something like that, to qualify for the national debate tournament. And we didn't. And it's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. Because it's like, I remember that ride back, it's like real quiet for like hours. And I remember just thinking to myself, it's almost like I viewed it like it was a Rocky montage. You know, Rocky's like working out and he's, you know, the montage is going on. That's how I looked at like all of my preparation for that year. I knew what the ending was. I'm going to win in the end. But I didn't. I lost. And it was a great lesson. Sometimes you do things and you don't win. Sometimes life kicks you in the teeth. I learned that lesson in a very benign way. I didn't qualify for a debate tournament that I wanted. Sometimes you learn that lesson with a tragedy. You know, sometimes you do everything right and things still don't work out. So for me, it was a good lesson to learn, but in a sort of safe way. And then I said, what can I do better? And some things I did better. I still didn't do everything that I could, and I ended up qualifying the next year. But I'm glad that I didn't that first year. It was an important lesson for me. And the same is true. You know, I said the same in 2022. That night, when Republicans vastly underperformed, I said to myself, what can I do differently? What can we do differently? So I put a lot of time and effort into changing the way the Pennsylvania RNC was ran. I didn't do near as much as someone like a Scott Pressler, But that was where my focus was for some time. Then my focus became on being a dad. And so I haven't done near as much of the work as I should. But that's, in general, what happened. So what I'm trying to say is, I think Halpern, or however you say his name, when he's talking about there's a mental health crisis, I agree there is going to be. And I certainly think it'll be way worse on the left, though there will be a lot of that on the right, too, if Trump loses. But it'll be way worse on the left. But what I'm saying, if you're watching and you're on the left, or if you're on the right, or you're a Trump supporter, Kamala supporter, somewhere in between, don't freak out. Don't freak out. It's all right. Life will go on. Yeah, people are going to mock you. People are going to be relentless. They're going to be brutal. And if you're a public face like me, someone who's out there debating and stuff, they're going to be real fucking brutal to me. It's okay. It's all right. I don't mind. Rob GPT, oh, Russians pay, you're the only one that spread Russian propaganda and didn't get paid by Russia. Oh, everything you say is GPT, blah, 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 blah. It's okay, let them do it. It's cathartic for them. To many of those people, this is what they have. They're not as lucky with me with like a loving family. They're not. Maybe they have more money than me, but some of them are miserable. Pisco can't call in right now, Conservative Carnage, because I'm on my phone, so I can't take a call. So I can't do it. Tomorrow we can. But, what was that? What did I miss? Charlie, go back and watch my YouTube video that says dealing with an NPC caller. There's a lot of points I make there why the Langford bill was bad. Damien Gershwin, thanks for the $2, says, Rob, your trim legit looks great. No joke, Jack. Thank you. I know it does. It looks much better. I need to make sure that I'm trimmed up more. I definitely do. And if you missed the beginning of the show, I've been having a lot of back pain. I have 2 herniated discs. I try to not talk about it a lot. Particularly, I probably talk about it more on the stream than I do in my day-to-day life. But it sucks, man. It fucking hurts a lot, if I'm being honest. And I'm trying my best not to take any sort of pain medication. So, you know, I've been using Aleve. I got these injections in my back. I woke up today, I felt like $1,000,000, man. It still hurts a little, but nowhere near what it was. So hopefully this is the right step to recovery. I know that this isn't a permanent solution, but I'm hoping it's getting me in the right direction. So I'm doing really good today. Cruz 465 for $5 says, still think Trump's going to lose. Kamala is looking real weak. I do. I think Trump's going to lose because I think that it's not about who is more popular and who more people want to win. It's about who gets the right votes and how those votes are counted. And I still think those mechanisms are tilted in such a way to all but ensure a Kamala Harris victory. But I also argue that I'm predisposed to do that I like having a chip on my shoulder and feeling like an underdog, and it causes me to work harder. And so I'm usually, you know, I go back to that old quote that I say all the time from a show I love called Meat Eater, starring Steve Vernell. He's fantastic, really, really awesome dude. He says about hunting, he's pessimistic with his mind, but optimistic with his feet. In other words, in his head, he's like, I'm not going to get this deer, but he keeps walking. He keeps doing all the things that you need to do, and it causes him to become more and more likely to achieve success by being pessimistic. That's how I operate. Now, I don't let that pessimism make me a miserable, sad person. I just use that pessimism to motivate myself. So, don't become an alcoholic. Too late. I was already an alcoholic once, but I'm done with it now. But yeah. So now tomorrow's show, I don't know what we'll do. Maybe we'll play some clips from this Kamala interview. Maybe we'll do a call-in show. I don't know. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. And then we'll have a show Friday as well. Just to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this, I'm trying my best to put at least one YouTube short up a day. No one ever watches my YouTube shorts. I think a lot of the people that like watch this live stream, for whatever reason, it's not showing up on your notifications when I do a YouTube short. So I'm going to try to continue to have my editor, Black Elk, clip from my live streams 4 or 5 days a week to put up a regular, normal YouTube video. And then I'm also going to be making a new short. And so if you see that new video up, the normal size video, check that shorts tab because there's probably a good chance that I'm putting a YouTube short up at least 5 days a week during the weekdays. So I would really appreciate it. And if you can give those a thumbs up, I would appreciate it. I hear that if you continue to put out that content in a consistent way, those shorts, it helps you in your algorithm. Ultimately, the shorts aren't the thing that I really want to be doing. I love doing these live streams, but the live streams aren't for everyone. And I think the shorts will allow me to get noticed by sort of a broader audience. Cruz465 for $5 says, Trump says he campaigns like he is 1 point behind. Words to live by. Absolutely agree. That's exactly how I look at things. Always act like you're losing, but that through your work effort and through actions you're taking that you can succeed. And that's just how I motivate myself. Again, what does that mean? My predictions aren't always going to be the best. I was dead wrong about 2016. In 2016, I said, I don't think there's a chance that Trump will win. I just didn't think they would let him win. I think ultimately their hubris was their own undoing in 2016. I think my predictions are very good when I'm talking about specific issues. I think my predictions on, for example, almost everything related to the pandemic was absolutely spot on. I predicted the lockdowns would be a disaster. I predicted locking down schools was uniquely going to be a disaster. I predicted it would cause inflation that we would be dealing with for years. I predicted that we'd find out that the numbers were being fudged with that. I predicted that we would find out that it was most likely came from a lab in China. All of those things, I think I was spot on. The same could be said of many of the other specific issues that have occurred. But when it comes to me saying who's going to win elections, I'm always going to lean on the side of pessimism, given how much I believe the system is corrupt. Rob, I should try to do Tim Pool style, like stream every day, just an hour. Then break it up into segments and post it as videos of engagement and get a boost in algo. It's not a bad idea, Weld, with two problems. One, because I have this job where I'm at work 24/7 for like 3-4 days a week, it's difficult for me to stream every day. Sometimes when I'm at work, I get to clock out like now, and I'm able to do a stream. Most of the time, that's not the case. So it'd be near impossible for me to live stream every day. The other thing is I'm terrible at editing, like brutally bad. So I have an editor that's working with me, Black Elk. He's doing a phenomenal job, but he also has a job and he doesn't have time to break up like 4 or 5 videos per live stream that we're doing here. So he's trying to get 1 video per live stream that I'm doing, or average around them. And so that's sort of the pattern that I've been trying to follow. But you're right. If I was to break up, if I could hire an editor for $50,000 a year to break up each live stream I do with its own unique thumbnail and graphics and captions and all that stuff, that would be preferable. Other thing to say, so look for me to be live streaming sometime between 6 and 8 p.m. starting tomorrow and Friday. The other thing to say is I do have some time off coming up. This is my busiest week of the year at work because we have a thing called licensing where it's sort of an audit by the state. My brother will take 50,000. Yeah, me too. So that's wrapping up this week. That should give me some more free time. What's my wife say? Courtney's my wife. She says, Rob, you should change your entire format of your show and just react to all the murder shows I make you watch. Lots of content. True. That's true. Absolutely. November 2nd will be my biannual election 24-hour stream. So every major election year, so your even years, 2020 or 2022 and now 2024, I will do a 24-hour live stream on the weekend before the election, as long as it's within my power. So that's going to be November 2nd. So that is a Saturday going into a Sunday. So we'll start at 8 a.m. on Saturday and it will go until 8 a.m. on Sunday. Now the secret is it's actually 25 hours because that turns out to be daylight savings time when we set our clock back. So it'll actually be a 25-hour stream, but we're gonna have a lot of guests. There's going to be an awful lot of Pennsylvania officials, county commissioners, people in the Pennsylvania RNC, Congress people at the state, hopefully at the federal level as well. So it's gonna be a great show. We're gonna have a lot of guests. You'll get to see me put on my interviewer hat. In addition to providing you with a bunch of content, we're gonna be having fun. I'm gonna be like, there's definitely gonna be entertainment value in it. There's gonna be the stated mission of trying to win Pennsylvania is going to be the theme this year, trying to get out that vote and encourage people in Pennsylvania. But we're also going to have officials, hopefully from other states, to talk about the importance, even if you don't live in Pennsylvania, of getting out the vote and doing as much as you can in any possible state. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of guests. There's going to be hours upon hours of just me riffing on my own. We'll take call-ins at some point. So it's going to be good stuff. And it gets weird like at 2, 3 in the morning when I start to get tired. So it'll be worth sticking around for those early hours to see what kind of weirdness I'm getting into. The people that are going to be helping me with that is Black Elk, who's my editor, who's fantastic. You could find in most of the video clips that I'm putting out on YouTube, you can find Black Elk's information. You can find him on X. If anyone's looking to hire an editor, please take Black Elk off my hands and pay him real money because he deserves it. He's fantastic at what he does. But shout out to him. He's awesome. Then I'm also going to have help from my former radio co-host, Carlos Saldivia. He's got way more connections to the actual political world here in Pennsylvania than I do. He's a political consultant who has a lot of connections, particularly out east in the center of the state of Pennsylvania. So he's running point on getting me a lot of those tremendous guests, and I'm sure he'll call in and be a co-host and help me with those interviews and things like that. My wife's going to be helping by making sure that I'm fed, taken care of, and not like, you know, withering away up there. Yeah, she'll bring up dinner, she will. And she's also helping me get prepared for it, just making sure that we have everything in order in the house to make sure that I could do that. And then I'm sure you'll see some friends of the show, people like Drone Tech, people like Aftershock, people like Aircraft Sparky, people like Casimir, Andrew Wilson. So there'll be a lot of people that are calling in that you know that are going to help me behind the scenes and then will help me that day as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The goal is that we want to win Pennsylvania. The secondary goal is I would love, by the end of that show, to have 10,000 YouTube subs. I think that would be amazing. So I think I'm at like 9,452 starting today's live stream. I think it would be tremendous if either before or during that 24-hour live stream, if I could get to 10,000 YouTube subs. If you haven't subbed to me, it's free. You could also become a member, which isn't free. And I am going to start putting content up. I'm motivated to start getting this content up. So we're going to start putting content up that's exclusively for members here on YouTube. But it costs nothing to sub. So if you haven't subbed, consider giving me a thumbs up, subbing, help me get those numbers. There is not going to be a beach or bikini episode of my show, no hot tub streaming or anything of that nature, but I will put together a special show for once I reach 10,000 subs. So might have to wait until after the election, depending on how busy you are. Also, I've talked with Black Elk. We got some plans coming up for some different type of content post-election season. So right now we're sort of in election mode, but after that, give us some time to catch our breath, maybe 2-3 weeks, a month, and we're going to start having different types of content. We're going to try to specialize in analysis of debate, because I think that that's something that I'm uniquely, as someone who was a debate coach, judge, and a debater in college, I think that I bring a different perspective. So we're going to try to be doing like 20-minute segments of debates that I see that I'll then react. It'll probably be like 1 or 2 hour videos of me reacting to 20 minutes of specific debates. We're going to try to put that content up. That probably won't be live. That'll probably be filmed content that was then edited with bells and whistles, etc. that Black Elk's going to do a great job of. So we're really trying to grow the channel, not just for me, though primarily for me, but also for you all too. And I think that there's some of you that are amazing that have stuck with me since 2019, where day after day after day I was streaming to 1 or 2 or 3 people live stream. So it's really impressive, like a night like tonight when I'm streaming mobile from a phone. You know, I got 140 people watching. Thanks, Conservative Carnage, I appreciate it. So yeah, you know, I know I've been really busy and I've been sort of slacking, but I'm committed to getting more consistent here with sort of the content I'm putting out, growing the channel. And I'd like to make an effort, if possible, to sort of have this inevitably be something that I could do more full-time. Whether that means transition completely full-time and quitting my job and streaming, I'm nowhere near close to being able to do that, but that is a goal long-term. Or it means just cutting back hours and working like a normal human being, like 40 hours a week as opposed to like 80 or 90. That too would afford me an opportunity to put more effort into my shows. I miss the days of when I was researching like a madman in order to prepare for debates. I think I'm a better debater in this format now than I've ever been. I think I'm fantastic. But I would be even more effective if I took what I know now on how to debate on a platform like this and combine that with sort of the research energy that I had previously before I was a father, before I was working 90 hours a week. I think if I could combine the best of those worlds, I think I'd be damn near unstoppable in doing a lot of these debates and could make a lot of inroads in a lot of different platforms and hopefully make something special from that. So, what did you say there? Rob, how many months of complimentary membership do I get if I have your face tattooed in my body? If you get my face tattooed in your body, here's what you'll get. Probably a trip to the psych ward and an awful lot of people, what's the word I could use to be polite to myself? turned off by the image. Get robbed, no idea. True story, when I debated, or when I played chess in high school, we had like a little chess club and just played with like the schools around here. I'm a terrible chess player, but I happened to be the best on my team because no one was very good at all. The first chess tournament I went to, there was this big dude, like even bigger than me, way taller, like I'm 5'8". This dude was probably 6'2", stocky dude, and he sits down like this and puts his hands on the on the table in front of me, and on his knuckles it said checkmate. I beat him in like 6 moves, but he's a cool guy. He's funny. We talked. He's like, I don't really play chess. I just learned, but my school needed a 4th player, so he thought he'd be intimidating. I thought that was cool. Yeah, my brother then played chess. Maybe a better chess player than me. I don't know if Jesse's better than me or not. I suck. I play all the time casually on my phone, and I'm terrible. I think I've gotten worse. So, all right, that's it. That's the plan. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, it might be a little repetitive tomorrow. Maybe I'll play some clips of this Kamala interview. I recommend you go watch it yourself. I think it was an absolute train wreck. Check it out. But remember, don't get too freaked out by the election. I'm excited for it more than anything. I'm excited to stream about it. I'm excited to get in the grit and talk more about the specific stuff that's going on. I'm excited for the 24-hour stream. I'm excited for Election Day. And then hopefully we win. If we don't, get a plan moving forward, but it'll be like huge breath. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm tired of seeing ads, political ads all the time, and even people that rarely talk to me about politics are now talking to me about politics, which don't get me wrong, I'm happy for that. But it'll be nice to have a moment to breathe. So, yeah, Jesse, of course. Yeah, JoJo. Yeah, get those subs in. Tell your friends, even if they don't like me. Go to this fat guy's channel and sub to his channel. It'll be great. Let's get him to 10,000. It'll be fantastic. So, all right. Thank you so much, everyone. Hello, old Joe. We're just leaving. Good 2-hour stream there. Appreciate you all. We'll see you all tomorrow evening between 6 and 8 p.m. Eastern time. As always, have a good